Welcome to the Teach Them Diligently podcast. I am your host, Leslie Nunnery, and I am so thankful that you've chosen to join us here again this week. David and I are really excited because we started last week a series all about parenting towards your goals. We are walking through a specific passage in Ephesians and getting really practical about how, if this is what you want to see in your kids, how step by step do you parent towards those goals and measure it? We're going to be talking about that in just a few minutes. The passage that we're talking about today has a lot to do with love, which just is a happy accident. David and I celebrated our 26th anniversary this week. And so, it seems very, very appropriate. But one thing that I have learned in those 26 years, as I've gotten to know him better, I love him so much more than I did 26 years ago when we started on this adventure together. And the same is true in your walk with God. As you, as a parent, get to know him better, you're going to learn to love him more. As you point your kids to him more, they're going to grow to love and look like him more. It is a beautiful, beautiful picture of the church, the bride of Christ. We see it in our own marriages. We see it in our relationship with Christ. And so I'm excited for us to talk about that today. Before we dive in, though, I want to make sure that you know we are just right knocking on the door of May, where we have two events waiting for you. We will be in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, May 2nd through 4th. We'll turn around 2 weeks later. We'll be in Branson, Missouri, May 16th through 18th. We have a phenomenal lineup of speakers and workshops for you that will encourage the socks off of you. But in addition to that, we've got amazing resources that will be available to touch and feel and look through. You can talk to the authors. You can ask your questions. You can get insight. Show them to your kids if they're going to be there. Just a great opportunity. But really, beyond all of those things that are very, very tangible, the workshops, the speakers, the access to resources, the fellowship that you're going to be able to enjoy, the friendships that you're going to make, the experience of being there with so many other Christian homeschool families who are as devoted to their mission as you are, will be so impactful. So if you have not yet gotten your ticket, get it today. I know it's hard. I know it's a sacrifice. I know you think you don't have time to go, but nothing good comes without a little bit of friction. And so I encourage you to move everything out of the way. Your family will benefit so much from this. Make the decision that you guys are going to come and get your tickets now and join us in May. I promise you will never regret it. You can go to teachthemdiligently.net/events and get your tickets today. Give us a holler in either on social media or in the app. We will cheer and yay and get so excited that we get to see you then. So again, go to teachthemdiligently.net/events to get your ticket now. If you're enjoying our podcast, I would love for you to help us in this ministry. All you need to do is leave us a 5-star rating. A review would be wonderful. A testimony of how God has used it to encourage your heart. That just helps us reach more people every week, more families, and that's what God has called us to do. So would you join us in that by helping us by going to just your favorite podcast provider, leave us a rating and review. We would be eternally grateful. So now, David, can you catch us up just a little bit for those who may not have heard the start of this series? In a nutshell, just help them understand better kind of where we've been and where we're headed.
Well, so we are looking at this from the standpoint of what is your big goal? What is your big why? What is your calling? So what has God called you to do as a parent? Mm-hmm. And the answer to that question we take from the story of Jesus with the little children. So it's bring your children to Jesus Christ. That is what the calling that every parent has. So when that child was born, when you adopted that child, when you brought that child into your family, you suddenly were given this calling by God to bring that child to Jesus Christ. And God, which I am just ecstatic about this particular element of our relationship with God, but he delights in using his people. Yeah. And so he wants you to bring your child to Jesus Christ. And so what does that mean? Because immediately when you take that on as what your calling is, there's a couple things that come to you. One of them is that's a goal, that's a calling that you're never done with. That is decades long. And the other thing is that is a goal, that is a calling that is so big that it is really hard to understand what that means. Yet, how do you measure that? How do you know when you have achieved that big why, that calling? How do you know?
Mm.
And so, in order to actually determine how you are doing with your calling, you have to break it down. You have to have a series of what we would call concrete goals.
Okay.
Which are a concrete goal is something that is measurable.
Mm.
You can measure how you are doing. So you can actually go to these particular things, and they are observable.
Right.
And they are things that are measurable. You can see them in somebody.
Yeah, and just to insert here, when we talk to people about parenting, and David alluded to this just a minute ago, it feels so big, it feels so impossible, like, it's almost an overwhelming concept. But God's word gives us so many instruction pieces, so many things. David calls them concrete goals, so many specific things that we can be measuring all along the way. Your heart can be encouraged. You can see growth in your kids. You can see how you're doing as a parent. It's so encouraging to be able to look at that, rather than just kind of swimming in the overwhelm of, I guess we'll see when they're teenagers if they walk away, or I guess we'll see if
it's only by grace.
Yeah. Just, it's so many parents that we've talked to are really at the point where they're just throwing their hands up, like, and it is by grace that God keeps your children moving in the direction that you would like to see. But it's by his grace and through you, because he, like David noted, he delights to use his children. So I think that this study and a myriad of others that we've done through the years would be really, really encouraging to you, just to see. I did one series of lessons on the rubric, because we are homeschoolers, but there are rubrics, there are concrete goals, there are very specific things that we can parent to that actually makes this big, huge goal so much more attainable, reasonable, like in the moment. But also we can wrap our head around these individual things and how we can get there a lot better than we can this big goal and looking at it all as one piece.
Yes. And the other thing about this is that we can inspire you, right? You come to a Teach Them Diligently event and you walk out the door and you are inspired. Yep. Matter of fact, I will guarantee you that if you come to a Teach Them Diligently event, that you will be inspired and motivated when you walk out the door.
Yes.
But I don't want it to end there. I mean, really what I long to do is to have you not only be inspired, but be able to walk out with these concrete, okay, now what? Mm-hmm. What does this mean for me? And you start having these action points that you can actually hold on to and that you can actually put into action that will lead you into this thing that you are inspired to. So if you are inspired, we're just going to assume right now that you are inspired by the idea to bring your children to Jesus Christ. Now what?
Yep.
What does that mean for you? And how does that change what you're going to do in terms of parenting? Because there's two ways to look at what we're doing here. And we're looking actually specifically, the verses that we're looking at are Ephesians 5, 1 through 20. And what we're doing is that we're saying, assuming that you are called and that you are inspired by this calling to bring your children to Jesus Christ.
And to give them a solid foundation for a faith that is their own.
What does that mean? So what things am I not only going to measure as this is my measuring stick for how I am doing in this journey, this adventure of bringing my children to Jesus Christ. Not only is it coming from that direction as a measuring stick, but the other side is I can parent to these things because I have this calling of bringing my children to Jesus Christ. I want to see these things in my child. So therefore, I'm going to parent to them. Mm. So the first one that we did was, who does they imitate? So if your calling is to bring your children to Jesus Christ, you're going to look at who they are wanting to imitate as your measuring stick for how you're doing in your calling. But not only are you going to look at that and look around and say, okay, who do they want to imitate? Who are they drawn to? Where's their gravity towards? Right? I'm using gravity as what is their sun, right? What do they want to orbit around? But not only that, but you can parent to this by putting them in the orbit, into the influence, in the proximity of certain kind of people that you want them to imitate. Do you want them to imitate you? Because that gets into how you have your relationship. What is your relationship with God like? And do you work on your relationship with Jesus Christ in terms of reading your Bible every single day and devotions and prayer? And do your children actually see you praying to God? Do you bless food when you're sitting around the table? All of those kind of things. And then you start early.
Right. So all of that we discussed last week. We'll leave the link in the show notes so that you can get you can catch up, because we really worked that out for you last week, giving you a lot of specific examples. And so this week we're going to be talking about walking in love, because the next verse in that Ephesians passage goes there.
Yeah, the next passage is walk in love as Christ loved us, and it's sacrificially. Right? This is like the very next section of verse. And so what does that mean? So if your goal is to bring your children to Jesus Christ, what you're going to see in them is this walking in love as Christ loved us. And so you're going to have this sense of love. Now, love is something that really has been messed up now. People define love in all kinds of crazy ways. There's this assumption that there's never an argument in the midst of love. There's never a disagreement in the midst of love. There's never a harsh word in the midst of love. You never tell somebody something that they don't want to hear. You're accepting of somebody, no matter what it might be, because you love them. And I'm going to tell you, that is not love at all. That's not the love that the Bible talks about at all. That's not the way Jesus Christ loves us. He has no problem. Jesus Christ, remember the Samaritan woman? He has no problem telling us where we have messed up. And if you listen to the world today, you wouldn't do that. That's not love.
Well, the Bible gives us a whole lot of information, though, about what love is. Famously, we have the entire chapter of 1 Corinthians 13, where Paul goes through all of these things, and he basically boils it down to, if you do any of these great things but you don't have love, then it's worthless. And the love that Paul talks about there, which I've broken out quite a few times in 365 in our Heart School Parenting Intensive, we talk about this a lot deeper. But the love that Paul talks about there is a self-sacrificing love. In every one of those ways, love is patient, love is kind, love does this, love does not do that. All of these things that we see in that passage, underlying that is a self-sacrificial. You make the decision that you are going to act on behalf of the other. And so that is a very powerful change, really, paradigm shift to how the world looks at love. Because so much of how we look at love in marriage, I even, as I was thinking this week with our anniversary, when we first got married, I had a lady at our church tell me, "Oh, I just love the way he looks at you." And I did too. I do too. But that really stuck with me. And as a young bride, if he wasn't looking at me the way that I thought that woman really liked to see him look at me, that was indicative to my young heart that maybe something was wrong. I was basing it on something so external, so shallow. And so often as we look at love, we look at things that are so shallow and so surfacey, rather than going really deep into the, not just the emotion, but the decision the act of the will that love really truly is. And that is what Jesus modeled for us. He modeled for us a love that went beyond any kind of reason. It went beyond any kind of emotion. And it was self-sacrificing in every single way. And that really is a massive, in stark contrast to how the world portrays it.
Yeah. So the question again, in our context that we're working in right now, is that if your calling is to bring your children to Jesus Christ, what does that mean, right? And so in Ephesians 5, we get to this point where it's walk in love as Christ loved us. So how would you parent to love? Right? How would you parent to this kind of love? And what we have to do really is that we have to actually define, and we have to actually need to probably do a little bit of a word study on what love means. And we're not going to be able to unpack this 100% in terms of what love is in this particular podcast. So my encouragement for you is that you do your own study on love as you go through 1 Corinthians 13. And we can actually go through some of this. So I mean, we're not going to just state this and then throw you out. We're going to actually go through, this is how you parent towards love. We're going to go through the first part of this, but I encourage you to continue on, keep going with this.
Yeah. And if you're a 365 member, I'm going to give you some links where a couple of years ago we took 3 or 4 different videos and actually broke down what love is, how it acts, what it does, what it doesn't do. I will link that series for you because I do think it will be helpful as you are deep diving and looking into this on your own.
Yeah. So the verse actually talks about walk in love, and then it references Christ's love. So this is how Christ loved us. And so how did Christ love us? And then how would we parent to that? Right? How would we use this as not only a measuring stick, as seeing the way Christ loved in our children, but how we parent to this and actually helping our children be able to learn what love is and be able to do this in your home and with their siblings and with those that are around them. How would you parent to this?
Yeah. So as we give just kind of practical examples, they are just that. They are examples. But what they do is they give us something very tangible to look at that we can gauge, because, by a man's heart is seen by their actions. And so these tangible examples that we're giving give us insight into our children's hearts and where their priorities are, what they believe is important, and so on. And so as we talk about these practical things, I hope that you'll view them in that way.
So the first one is going to be compassion. So what did Jesus show? I mean, how did he love us? Well, the first thing was compassion. And I mean, really, ministry starts in compassion. You look at the feeding of the 5,000, what motivated Jesus to feed those people in the feeding of the 5,000 was compassion. And so compassion moves you to action. And compassion is actually a little bit different. It's seen as a synonym of sympathy, but it's a little bit different. Sympathy might actually cause you to say, I have sympathy. I feel really bad that you are going through this difficulty. Compassion is actually urging you to action. So rather than just having a feeling for somebody, you're going to be urged to action. So let's say that somebody is, and just using a very simple kind of illustration, somebody is carrying something really heavy and you see them breaking down in under the weight of something that is super heavy and they are struggling to carry something. Sympathy might go, I feel really bad for you having to carry that. Compassion is going to urge you to go over and grab one side of whatever they're carrying and help them carry that to wherever they need to go. And so that's what compassion is, and that's what the difference is. And so this is a very important difference to understand, because compassion is going to urge you to action.
Actually, I studied this pretty extensively several years ago. And that word for compassion that you see a lot for Jesus, you see it in Jude 22. It literally talks about like this movement in your gut, like there is something inside of you that will not let you pass by without getting involved, without showing tangibly compassion, getting involved in a situation, helping in a very tangible way. And that impacted me greatly because, like David said, sympathy may be a mental thing and even an emotional thing, but compassion is love in action. That
Okay.
is really, really showing people. And it's something that as you become more like Jesus, you aren't even able, you have to act on people's behalf. And that's what we're looking for.
So compassion is like this outpouring of this love that Jesus has.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You are exemplifying Jesus's love through compassion. And so one example like that just happened to us is that we do these bags. We hand out bags at every single one of our events, and they have all of these bag stuffers in there. And it takes hours to stuff these bags.
Hours doesn't go far enough. We're talking 40, 45 man hours of just good fellowship time, but really hard, just walking
Stuffing
around doing,
bags.
just doing it over and over. It's
monotony.
It's a hard job.
So we were not able to personally to stuff these bags, and so we put out a call for somebody to help us to be able to stuff these bags. We're willing to pay them to stuff these bags, and we had a couple to virtually raise their hand and say they would stuff the bags, but they're going to take the money that we are going to pay them, and they are going to donate this money to a mom that really needs the money. So they had a mom who came to them that is in a Bible study that they run, and she needs help. She doesn't have a source for these funds, and they are urged to action to actually help this mom. And they're going to stuff bags, the entire 45 hours of stuffing these bags, take the money, and they're going to give 100% of the money to this mom. And they have brought in other families.
Well, they were able to mobilize just every the people in the Bible study with this mom. And it was such a beautiful, example of being the hands and feet of Jesus, of showing compassion. And we were there yesterday as they were working after church all together. And there were all of these young kids running around seeing their parents doing this. That was such a phenomenal. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The kids were doing this too. They were stuffing as well.
But this was such a phenomenal teaching moment, discipleship moment for those young children. Not only do we talk the talk, do we say that we need to care about others, but we are banding together. This is how we show Jesus's love to others. And through the years, God is going to give you so many opportunities like that you can model for your kids, and then start to look for, are they picking up on these situations themselves? Because that's what you want to eventually see in them, is that they see these needs and are spurred to action.
That's right. So are they self-motivated to compassion for others? So it's service to others. And so as a parent, you can not only provide these opportunities, Operation Christmas Child, stuffing boxes may be an opportunity for this, helping around the church. This is the way you would parent towards compassion. But then you also, what you want to see in your children is that you want to see this self-motivation to act, so that when they see somebody that is struggling under the weight of something, or that they see somebody around the church that is setting up tables and chairs, that they don't sit around and just wait for somebody to come up to them and say, can you help? They are spurred to action as soon as they see it. They are self-motivated to action. So around the house, do they help you, Mom, when they see that you have a lot going on? Do they help you set the table without being asked constantly? These are the kind of things, and there's small things and there's big things.
Well, another really great example that I think we can all relate to is most of our kids, I think, probably share a bathroom. And, we had 4 sharing one bathroom, so 2 boys, 2 girls, and we always kind of stood back and waited for when the explosions were going to take place.
We were literally waiting for an explosion.
Yeah. And that is a great scenario where from the time that they were very young, we taught them in honor, preferring one another. We taught them to have compassion on the needs of others. And that shows up very tangibly in hogging the bathroom, in taking too much time there, in, just being ugly about it. It's a really little thing. And we don't think about that as a great teachable moment. And yet, that is one that is right there all the time. And we can absolutely teach to it in honor, preferring one another. How do you show compassion for your brothers and sisters when it comes to bathroom time? Really, really simple, but very
And
insightful.
how do they handle the younger brothers and sisters? And I mean, do they handle their younger brother and sisters as a just absolute annoyance? Do they bully them? Do they take advantage of them? Do they help them when they're reaching for something in the house that they can't reach because they're smaller? I mean, I I don't know, and I also know that you see various levels of lack of this kind of compassion in your families, but that's where the parent comes in and they start to actually train their child and not let this go by without jumping on this, because this show of compassion is an exhibition of the love that
Right.
Christ has. And you want to see that in your child, and you want that to develop over time. And so maybe they're younger and they struggle with this. This is something that you build in them over time. You are consistent in it. You are active in this. You set up moments where you actually test where they are in this particular element of showing compassion.
Well, and when you see a deficiency in this, when they don't respond in the way that you would really want them to, a lot of times they're not doing anything that is categorically wrong. So you're not going to go in and, like, it's not a punishable offense. But as a parent on mission who has as their goal to bring their children to Jesus, to give them a solid foundation, to help them become more like Him, you're going to find times after the fact to either set them up for another opportunity, to talk them through, not in a confrontational way necessarily, but in a modeling way, in a helping them understand the importance of it way. These looking for these things will open your eyes to so many opportunities for great conversations and discipleship moments that God will use powerfully in your kids' lives.
Yeah, and I think that when you were talking about categorically, these are not these are things that you may actually see as minor offenses if you don't have the antenna towards compassion.
Yeah.
You need to train your children to have compassion, because this is walking in love as Christ loved us. And you want to bring them to Jesus Christ. I think you're understanding how this works now. Is that this is something that you are looking for opportunities to give them have opportunities to exhibit compassion, and you are actually developing those. You are watching these and you are training them in this way, and then you're also using it as a measuring stick for how you are doing in your calling, which is to bring your children to Jesus Christ. The next one is going to be in terms of, what did Jesus do, right? How did Jesus love us? Well, He forgave us. So how are your children doing in forgiving others? How are you doing in forgiving others? And we actually had a rule in our house, and I think that you guys, all everybody that I'm talking to right now, they are very active in making sure that their children apologize to their brothers and sisters. Well, we would actually take that a little bit further, where we would make sure that the one that was offended, the one that was said I'm sorry to, the one that was apologized to, would it wasn't over until that person says, I forgive you. And we were really strict on this. We would make sure that the one that was offended, the one that was hurt, would say, I forgive you.
Now, um, recognizing So recognizing that we can't affect the heart, um, we cannot change what's in their heart. However, we can set them on the path to knowing what should be. So as we modeled and we expected forgiveness out of them, um, we were really, the Bible talks about, that the teach them diligently verse has a lot to do with whetting their appetite, training them up in the way they should go. We're whetting their appetite. We're setting them on a course. And so as young children, they were taught to extend forgiveness. And that is something that we have seen over and over. As they have been older, they have been actually very faithful to continue to do that. But again, the expectation was set that this is how believers engage with one another. We extend forgiveness when it is asked.
Yeah, they forgive, and so they don't hold grudges, so they don't hold on to it. They let it go.
Mm-hmm.
They forgive, and so we actually had them verbalize that in the thought process that would actually indicate what was going on in their heart. And so we would actually be very strict on making sure that they forgave. The other thing is that they looked beyond the surface in people. And here, what I'm talking about is that how did Christ love us, right? How did he show his love for us? Well, he looked beyond the surface. And I'm going with this is that he actually it invited the thief when he was on the cross. The thief, we're not told anything else about this guy. He was just described as the thief. He was characterized as being the thief. And Jesus was willing to look beyond that to invite him into heaven. And so that's where I'm going with this. And so, do they actually cringe at people that don't look the way they do? And this can take on a lot of different levels, right? This could be homeless people. This could be people that don't smell very good. This could be people that are tattooed up left and right and that they have, all of the earrings, right? This could be anything. This could be anything. But are they able to actually consider somebody for their heart? So can they actually see beyond what the outward appearance is? Are they superficial?
We're not getting this. It never picked up. So I'm gonna go make sure that we got the other part. I don't know what is the problem, but
What? Okay.
So, just to be clear here, we acknowledge that we can't actually change a person's heart. However, we can whet their appetite. The teach them diligently verse, the train up a child in the way he should go verse. As I talked about in my first book, Teach Them Diligently, those both have a lot to do with shaping them, whetting their appetite, pointing them in the direction that they should go. So when they were young and we would make them acknowledge, I forgive you, not, it's okay, not whatever, but I forgive you. We were really instilling in them the understanding that forgiveness is yours to give. It's actually freeing for you. Holding on to a grudge allows bitterness. It is actually horrible for the person who's holding on to it. So we wanted to teach our kids not to do that. So yes, I forgive you has always been a really big deal, and it still is with our children who are now grown. Just extending that forgiveness, that is yours to give. So we can force both sides of that conversation. We can force one of them to apologize. We can force the other to forgive. That doesn't change hearts, but it does model for them what is expected and what is right, and what Jesus modeled for us.
Yeah, and so it's hard to fake that consistently, I guess we'll say. And so what you're trying to do is that you're trying to get to their heart, and by constantly having them say, I forgive you, what is starting to happen is that you're starting to actually, as Leslie was saying, it's almost like this muscle,
Yeah.
whetting their appetite. You're building that up in them. And so what you're looking for is you're looking for this improvement, because again, coming back at this from both directions, not only are you using this as a measuring stick, right? Which means that you want improvement. You want to track this over time, right? How are they doing in forgiving others? How are they doing for asking for forgiveness? How are they doing in showing compassion? Right? How are they doing in these areas? But you also compare it to these things as well. So what you want to do is you want to see them physically say, I forgive you. Right? And over time, that's going to indicate exactly, if it doesn't right at the very beginning, it's going to indicate what's going on in their heart, because they're going to start to actually do that.
Well,
Okay.
we're also setting them up, the offenses for which they will need to forgive people for tends to get bigger.
Yeah.
And this is really giving them a good foundation for living in freedom for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Forgiveness is big, guys. And so, again, we are trying to see and trying to parent towards walk in love as Jesus, right? And so, as Jesus loved us sacrificially. And so, the next one would be merciful, right? Jesus is merciful. He died on the cross. He forgave us for our sins. He was merciful. And so, that this is connected to the forgiveness. And so, do they hold grudges, right? Do they have a problem with forgiveness?
Do they seek revenge?
Do
Are they always looking for a gotcha moment?
Do you encourage that? Oh, it's okay because he hit them first. He stole the ball first.
It'll teach him a lesson.
It'll teach them a lesson. No, you don't want them to actually learn revenge. You want them to learn forgiveness
and mercy.
And so you want to actually encourage this in them. Right. And so, for instance, there's one thing that we used to always do when children would fight over stuff. We would actually take the thing they were fighting over and we would remove it from the conversation 100%. We wouldn't let them wrestle with it. We wouldn't take it from the one that it was taken from and then give it. We wanted them to actually have mercy and forgiveness and actually be able to be okay with these things. And so we were really careful in this mercy thing as well. We would not allow them to have revenge, right? We would watch that just as much as we were watching the one that was offending first. We would watch the revenge.
Yep.
Right? And the person that had revenge, it was not okay. You would have to say that you're sorry as well. The next one is seeking their own wants and needs selfishly. We were really strict on our children saying mine. We did not want their children to maybe grab something that was their toy and say mine, that's mine. We were very careful about that. And so there was moments where I would actually correct the children when I would hear them say, "That's mine." Say, "No, we don't say that, that's mine." We don't want them to selfishly guard what they have. We don't want that, right? We want them to actually be willing to share, to be generous. And so we were really careful about those things. We didn't want them to actually deal with hurt. We didn't want them to deal with people stealing stuff from them,
Right,
but we
right.
didn't want them also to say mine,
So,
right?
so what you're going for here is an understanding, first of all, that things are not as big of a deal as relationships. But in those mine moments, as David was referring to, you have the opportunity to teach the offender, the one who is trying to take a lot of lessons, but you also have the opportunity to teach the one who is offended a lot of lessons. You're able to remove, by removing the thing that they were fighting or squabbling over, you're able to get down to the root of what's really going on, which is at its root, it's not a weeble that is, the greatest thing in the world. It's the selfishness and the greed, and there are underlying issues that you want to be able to deal with, again, appropriately. You're bringing your children along a path, but don't allow yourself to be distracted by just the leaves, just the surface stuff. As a parent on mission, as a heart schooling parent, like we talk around here or talk about around here, you are always want to go for the root. What is actually propelling these actions forward? We want to see in our children that what is propelling every action and reaction that they have is that they are loving like Jesus loved. They have this in their heart. They love God so much that it overflows into how they treat others. That's what we're going for. And that's what, as a parent on mission, we encourage you to go for.
Yeah. And so some of this is framing. Some of this you might be doing already, but what you're not doing is that you're not framing it under this idea that I am teaching my children to love as Jesus loves. And my goal is that they do this on their own. And so, for instance, compassion. Are they looking for opportunities to serve? Well, when your young men get to be teenagers, do they just sit around and wait for somebody to tell them to go help mom bring the groceries in from the car? Or are they self motivated to do that on their own? Do you actually train them in that fashion? Do you say, this is something we always do? You don't wait for me to say, this is something we always do. When mom gets home with the groceries, you go out there and you help her bring this in because you have compassion on her, because you're worried about the numbers of trips.
Mm.
You're worried about the weight in terms of having mom carry all these bags that have a lot of weight to them. You want to go out there and you want to help, right? And so you are framing this in terms of, it's a measuring stick. So it's something that you want to see in them that they are self-motivated to do. But then on the other end, you are not just teaching them what's right. You are teaching them to exhibit Christ the way Christ loved us, right? You are trying to show them how to love the way Christ loved us sacrificially. And so you want them to not only do this on their own, but you want to have it framed in terms of, this is an exhibit of love. And so that is a big part of the way that you're trying to do this. So some of you might be doing some of this stuff already, but you're not quite framing it right. And so what you want to do is you want to frame this in terms of, I am bringing my children to Jesus Christ by teaching them to love as Christ loved us. And therefore, because of that, I want to see these things in them. And plus, I'm going to parent towards these things. And that's how you can actually do this study on your own. You can go to the 1 Corinthians 13 verse. Love is patience. Love is kind. Okay, now how am I going to parent towards my child, knowing that love is patient and being able to exhibit the love is patient and love is kind, right? Love is merciful. How am I going to show that? Because Christ was merciful to us. You're going to be able to build all this stuff out.
Well, and as I noted at the very beginning, as a parent on mission, you as you are getting to know God better, as you are recognizing your need for him to lead you, you're going to start looking more like him. You're going to find so many more reasons for you to love him. And that is going to naturally overflow and really fill your household with that kind of a heart that loves, that desires to serve, that has compassion, that is merciful, that forgives. So God does a great work in our lives as parents as we are seeking his face and then allowing him to use us to parent our children well. So that's really what we wanted to encourage you with today. We talk all the time here about how the Great Commission begins at home. Your home is your Jerusalem. And so, with all of these things that we're going to be talking about over the next several weeks, as you are parenting towards these specific attributes, these specific measurable goals, underlying all of that, you are really have this goal of bringing them to Jesus and giving them a solid foundation for a faith that is their own, so that when they go out from your home, they will not waver in their faith, in what they believe. They will be prepared to turn the world upside down for the sake of the kingdom. And you, mom and dad, get the privilege of doing that work right now to prepare them. And that's an amazing thing. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to talking to you again real soon.